1982nd. Year Blackridge 17. The town did not exist on any map. Officially, it was a remote research logistics outpost somewhere in northern Alaska, hundreds of miles above the Arctic Circle. In reality, it was a sealed federal compound buried in a frozen basin between jagged, pine-choked ridges, built during the earliest days of America's nuclear programs. Concrete buildings, poured thick and gray, stood like blunt teeth in the snow. Winter arrived in September and rarely loosened its grip. Even in summer, the cold lived inside the walls. Secrets lasted longer here than people did. A month earlier, something had fallen out of orbit. It came down near Polaris Station 12, a polar research facility positioned on the northern edge of the Arctic archipelago, farther north than most people would ever travel in their lifetime. Built by the military, later handed off to civilian scientists, it now operated under a classified division so obscure even most Pentagon staff had never heard of it. Officially, the object was believed to be a failed Soviet reconnaissance satellite. Unofficially, no one believed that anymore. The object had hit the ice, punched through, and disappeared beneath the frozen surface. 3 days ago, Polaris Station 12 stopped responding. That was why they were here. The briefing room inside Blackridge 17 was functional, stripped of personality. The walls were painted a washed-out institutional green that had yellowed with age. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile, corpse-like glow across the long wooden table at the center of the room. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall, each stamped with bold red classification markings. Arctic maps covered the far side of the room, satellite imagery, ice density charts, structural diagrams. The edge of the world stared back at them in blue and white. The team sat in silence, studying one another with guarded curiosity. Some smoked, some checked watches. No one made small talk. Then the door opened. Colonel Raymond Hale stepped inside. Mid-50s, lean. Pressed uniform sharp enough to cut glass. His face carried the particular exhaustion of a man who had spent too many years carrying secrets that could never be spoken aloud. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice calm but heavy. "I'm Colonel Raymond Hale. I oversee Project Polaris." His gaze moved slowly across the room. "You weren't selected by accident." He opened a thick black folder. Team lead, Captain Marcus Kane, Special Operations, Afghanistan, Arctic Survival Certification. You're responsible for operational command and security. Marcus Kane gave a slight nod. Early 40s, broad shoulders, gray threading his temples. Eyes that had seen too much and processed even more. He studied the others carefully, measuring them. Dr. Emily Carter, biologist, senior researcher with the National Science Directorate. You'll assess any biological anomalies encountered. Emily was 33, sharp-featured, dark hair cut short at the jawline. Focused, controlled. She didn't nod, just held Hale's gaze. Daniel Goldman, communications and electronics engineer, MIT graduate. You'll keep the equipment alive in conditions that kill everything else. Goldman adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and offered a thin, almost ironic smile. Slender, observant. The kind of man who noticed what others missed. Staff Sergeant Ryan Cole, demolition specialist. If the object is buried under ice or rock, you'll get us access. Cole nodded once. Youngest of the military personnel. Alert, quiet. Dr. Leonard Hayes, medical officer and forensic pathologist. Hayes, mid-50s, silver threaded through his beard, folded his hands calmly on the table. His eyes were thoughtful, curious in a way that bordered on unsettling. Communications operator, Paul Dawson. Dawson looked barely 25.
Local Alaskan kid. Nervous energy radiated off him, though he tried to mask it with a half smirk. And finally, Doctor.
Laura Mitchell, expedition psychologist. Mitchell inclined her head politely, early 40s, impeccably composed, watching everyone even when she appeared not to be. Colonel Hale closed the folder. 1 month ago, an unidentified object re-entered orbit and crashed within the operational radius of Polaris Station 12. Initial assessment suggested foreign surveillance hardware, but the object penetrated the ice shelf and vanished beneath the surface. He paused. 3 days ago, Polaris Station went dark. The room tightened. No distress call, no evacuation request. Nothing. Hale's eyes hardened. You will travel to the station, assess the situation, determine what happened, recover samples from the crash site if possible. This mission is classified above your current clearance. All communication runs through encrypted military channels only. Silence lingered. Emily Carter broke it. Colonel, why deploy a team like this now? Why not sooner? Hale looked at her carefully. Because until 3 days ago, they were still talking to us. That landed. They were alive, he finished quietly. Now they're not answering. No one asked anything else. They didn't need to. During the break, Marcus Kane left first. The corridor outside smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paint. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The building felt hollow, like a bunker waiting to be sealed. Goldman stood near an open window at the end of the hall, smoking despite regulations. Dr. Hayes stood beside him, hands in his coat pockets. Goldman extended the cigarette pack. "Long one, Captain?" Kane took it. Imported brand, not something easily found this far north. "Appreciate it." Hayes studied Kane quietly. "Strange situation," Goldman said, exhaling smoke into the cold air drifting through the window. "Satellite falls from orbit, disappears under ice, station goes silent. Convenient, isn't it?" Kane shrugged.
"We weren't asked to speculate." Goldman smirked slightly. "I hear you volunteered." Kane didn't answer immediately. He took a slow drag. "My wife died 2 months ago," he said finally. "Car accident." Goldman's expression shifted. "Sorry." Kane nodded once. "Didn't see much reason to stay home." Hayes's voice was softer. "Loss clarifies things." Kane looked at him. "You a religious man, Doctor?" Hayes gave a faint smile. "No, just experienced. I've cut open enough bodies to know death isn't the worst thing that can happen to someone." That hung in the air. Footsteps echoed behind them. Dr. Emily Carter passed down the corridor, heels clicking against concrete. Confident, focused. Goldman watched her go. "Didn't expect a civilian scientist on something this sensitive." Hayes murmured, "Didn't expect half of this." Paul Dawson appeared moments later, hands in his jacket pockets. "Hey," he grinned. "Heard Polaris isn't boring this time of year." Kane studied him. "You ever worked above the Arctic Circle?" Dawson hesitated. "No, sir." "Then stop smiling." The grin faded. A distant buzzer echoed through the building, signaling the end of break. Something about the sound felt final. The journey took nearly 3 days. First, a military transport aircraft groaning across endless darkness, then a helicopter heavy with supplies, fighting crosswinds that howled like something alive. 40 miles from Polaris Station, the pilot turned back. Storm front coming fast. Arctic cyclone. Too dangerous. They landed on open ice and continued on snow machines and sleds. The wind sharpened into knives. They slept under canvas while the ice groaned beneath them like a breathing organism. By the time Polaris Station came into view on the third evening,
Morale had thinned to a brittle edge.
The station stood half buried in snow, metal-clad buildings connected by enclosed walkways. A radio tower leaned slightly under the weight of accumulated ice. Windows stared outward, dark and empty. No lights, no smoke, no movement. The main door was locked from the inside. Kane didn't hesitate. He smashed a window with the butt of his knife and climbed through. The interior was colder than outside, silent. His flashlight beam cut through the gloom. He moved slowly, clearing rooms. The lab smelled of formaldehyde and blood. A massive polar bear lay gutted across a stainless steel table. Its abdomen had been split open crudely, organs removed and scattered as if someone had been searching for something inside it. Kane stared at the cavity. Not a survival kill, an examination. He moved on. The common room looked disturbingly normal. Old couches, magazines on a coffee table, a bulky television, coffee mugs half full, long frozen. It looked as though everyone had stepped out mid-conversation, but they hadn't come back. In the storage bay at the rear of the station, Kane found a heavy steel door, reinforced, blocked from the inside with crates and even a refrigerator shoved against it. He stepped closer. There it was. A faint sound. Scratching. Soft. Almost like fingernails against metal. He froze. Listened. It came again. Something was behind that door. He found a ring of keys hanging nearby, slipped them into his pocket, and returned to let the team inside through the main entrance. "Station's clear," he said shortly. But he didn't mention the sound. Not yet. Because whatever was behind that door was still alive. They should have opened the door immediately. Marcus Kane would replay that decision in his head for the rest of his life. But exhaustion makes cowards of careful men.
They sealed the broken window with insulation foam and plastic sheeting, brought in the remaining gear, and tried to turn Polaris Station 12 back into something that resembled a functioning outpost instead of a frozen mausoleum. Daniel Goldman worked on restoring internal power routing, while Paul Dawson attempted to establish long-range comms. Static answered him, thin, empty, endless. Dr. Hayes examined the gutted polar bear more closely. It wasn't predatory, he said quietly. This wasn't about food. Someone opened it up deliberately. For what? Emily asked. Hayes looked at the cavity again. I don't know. Kane didn't tell them about the scratching behind the storage door. Not yet. They searched the living quarters next. The southern wing held crew rooms, narrow beds, military-issue blankets, personal items still in place. In one room, a paperback novel lay open on the pillow, spine cracked mid-chapter. In another, a photograph taped to the wall showed a woman and two children standing beside a fishing boat. In a third, there was a child's crayon drawing folded neatly on a desk. Stick figures, a house, a sun. Emily picked it up and swallowed. They didn't leave in a hurry, she said. No signs of struggle, Ryan Cole added. No blood, Hayes confirmed. No bodies, Kane said. And that was worse. Back in the common room, they gathered around a map table. Tomorrow we head to the impact site, Kane said. We're done wandering blind. He hesitated. There's one more thing. He told them about the reinforced storage door, the scratching. Goldman's jaw tightened. You're sure? I heard it. Cole shifted in his seat. Could be an animal. Arctic fox. Something trapped. Hayes shook his head slowly. Foxes don't barricade themselves in with refrigerators. Silence. Tomorrow, Kane said firmly. We deal with it in daylight. No one argued. Night fell fast. The Arctic dark swallowed the station whole. They set up rotating watch shifts. The wind scraped against the outer walls like something trying to get in. Or out. Kane lay on a narrow cot, boots still on, pistol within reach. At some point after midnight, he heard it again. A long, slow, metallic drag. Not from outside, from inside the walls. He sat up instantly. The sound came again. A scratch, a soft thud, a wet, shifting noise. His radio crackled. "Captain?" Goldman's voice. Quiet. Tense. "You hearing that?" "Yes." "It's moving." Kane stood. "Stay in your rooms. Nobody moves alone." He stepped into the corridor. The station hummed faintly with backup power. Emergency lights flickered overhead. The sound came from the direction of storage. Then, silence. Morning didn't bring comfort. It brought Emily Carter's voice echoing down the hallway. "Marcus, get in here!" They converged on the storage bay. The heavy steel door stood slightly ajar. The crates that had blocked it were toppled outward, not inward. Something had come out. Kane drew his pistol. "Cole, grab something heavy. Goldman, behind me." They approached carefully. The storage room interior was empty. Dust undisturbed except for a long drag mark across the floor. Leading out. Leading into the station. "Where the hell is it?" Dawson whispered. "That's the wrong question," Kane said quietly. The right question was, where is it now? They split into pairs, room by room, methodical. Nothing. 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 Until Hayes's voice came through the radio. "Marcus, lab, now!" Kane ran. The gutted polar bear still lay across the table, but something had changed. Under the table, curled tight against the wall, a sled dog. White fur matted with blood, trembling violently. Emily crouched slowly. "It must have belonged to the original crew." "It was in storage?" Dawson asked. "Apparently," Goldman muttered. Kane knelt. The dog flinched, but didn't bite. Its eyes were wide, too wide. Hayes examined it quickly. No visible trauma, dehydrated, starving. Kane exhaled. "So that's what was scratching." "Seems likely," Hayes said. The tension in the room loosened just slightly. Cole even managed a short breath of a laugh. "Jesus, we nearly shot a dog." They brought it into the common room, gave it water, a ration bar softened in warm broth. The dog ate hungrily, too hungrily. Emily watched it carefully. "It's been alone in here for days," she said. "Poor thing." Kane stood by the window, staring into the white horizon. He felt something clawing at the back of his thoughts, something unresolved, but exhaustion dulled it. They returned to planning. "Impact site's roughly 2 miles northeast," Kane said, tracing a gloved finger across the map. "We go at first light tomorrow." Goldman leaned closer. "Original crew logs mention an ice fracture under the crash zone. Possible subsurface cavity." "A tunnel?" Cole asked. "Maybe." Emily frowned. "If that object punched through and exposed something buried beneath—" She didn't finish. A scream cut her off. High, raw, human. From the medical room. They ran. Hayes lay on the floor, struggling. The dog was on top of him, except it wasn't a dog anymore. Its torso had split open along the ribcage like unfolding petals. Bone fragments jutted outward as something inside pushed through. Its jaw unhinged wider than anatomy allowed. Tendrils, slick and pale, lashed from its mouth.
wrapping around Hayes' throat. "What the hell is that?" Dawson shouted. Kane fired. The first shot hit its shoulder. No reaction. The thing turned its head toward him. Its eyes were wrong now. Not canine. Deep, reflective, almost intelligent. Kane fired again and again. It shrieked, a layered sound, like multiple throats screaming at once. Cole grabbed a metal chair and swung. The impact crushed part of its skull. That slowed it. Hayes tore free, gasping.
Goldman seized a fire extinguisher and slammed it into the creature's side. It convulsed, collapsed, still moving. Kane emptied the rest of the magazine into it at point-blank range. Finally, it stopped. Silence swallowed the room. The smell hit them seconds later. Burnt meat, rot, something chemical, something not of this world. Hayes coughed violently, clutching his neck. "What was that?" Dawson whispered. No one answered, because no one knew. But Kane did know one thing. Whatever had come out of that storage room, it had not been a dog. And it had not been alone. For nearly a full minute, no one moved. The thing that had once resembled a sled dog lay in the center of the medical room floor, twisted into a shape that refused to make anatomical sense. Bone fragments protruded where joints shouldn't exist. Skin sagged in melted folds. Beneath the torn ribcage, something still twitched, small, rhythmic spasms, like dying electrical signals searching for a circuit. Dr. Leonard Hayes pressed a blood-soaked towel against his neck. "It tried to..." He stopped, swallowing hard. It wasn't biting. It was attaching. Emily knelt beside the carcass, fighting the urge to recoil. "Don't touch it," Kane snapped. "I won't." She leaned closer without making contact. It restructured itself. That wasn't simple mutation. That was adaptive transformation. Goldman stared at her. "English, please." "It changed shape intentionally," Cole muttered. "You're saying it decided to become that?" Emily's jaw tightened. "I'm saying it wasn't random." Kane looked at Hayes. "Are you bitten?" Hayes slowly removed the towel. 4 puncture wounds marked the skin just below his jaw. Too symmetrical, too deliberate. Dawson took a step back. "Jesus." "It didn't tear," Hayes said hoarsely. "It probed." The room went very still. Kane's voice hardened. "Emily, infection risk?" "I don't know," she admitted.
We don't know how it transmits. Blood, contact, airborne. Hayes let out a weak breath of something that might have been a laugh. Comforting. Kane made the call. "Cole, storage bay. We lock that room down permanently. Burn the remains." Goldman nodded quickly. "Yes, fire. Lots of fire." They wrapped the creature's body in heavy tarp without touching exposed tissue. Even then, Kane noticed something that made his pulse spike. The surface of the corpse wasn't uniform. It was shifting. Subtle. Slow. As though different textures were fighting for dominance beneath the skin. "Move," he ordered. They dragged it outside. The Arctic wind devoured the smell almost instantly. Cole doused it in fuel. Goldman lit it. Flames roared upward, bright orange against endless white. The body writhed once inside the fire, then stilled. They stood in silence as it burned down to blackened ruin. Hayes swayed slightly. "You need to sit," Emily said. "I'm fine. You're not." Back inside, she disinfected the wounds thoroughly, irrigated, bandaged. "Temperature checks every hour," she told Kane. "We monitor him closely." Hayes met Kane's eyes. "You're wondering if you should quarantine me?"
Kane didn't answer. That's good, Hayes continued quietly. You should. They moved Hayes into a separate room in the southern wing. Door closed. Not locked. Not yet. Kane didn't want to be that man. Not until he had to be. They regrouped in the common area. Nobody sat comfortably anymore. Nobody leaned back. Goldman's hands trembled as he lit another cigarette. That wasn't an animal, he said flatly. And it wasn't sick. It was pretending. Emily nodded slowly. Yes. Cole looked between them. Pretending how? It hid, she said. It mimicked a harmless form, something we'd lower our guard around. Dawson swallowed.
The dog. Yes. Kane's voice cut through. It was locked in storage, barricaded from the inside. Emily looked up at him. The original crew trapped it. And it waited, Goldman added. How long? Dawson asked. Emily's answer came softly. As long as it needed to. The question settled into the center of the room like a live wire. If it could imitate a dog, what else could it imitate? Hayes's radio crackled suddenly. Captain? Kane grabbed his own unit instantly. Go ahead. I'm fine, Hayes said. Just tired. How tired? More than I should be. Kane exchanged a look with Emily. We're coming to check. No, Hayes replied quickly. Too quickly. Silence. Then, softer. Give me a few minutes. Kane's eyes hardened. Door stays open. There was a pause. Of course. The transmission ended. Dawson shifted uncomfortably. You think he's turning into that thing? Emily didn't answer immediately. I don't know what turning would even mean. An hour passed, then another. Hayes's temperature remained normal, pulse steady. He insisted he felt fine, but something about his voice felt slightly delayed, as if he were processing responses a fraction too long. Kane didn't like it. At 2:17 a.m., the power flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Goldman cursed and rushed toward the electrical room. Backup generator shouldn't be fluctuating like that. Cole followed him. Kane stayed in the corridor between Hayes's room and the common area, watching both directions, listening. That's when he heard it. Not from storage, not from outside, from inside Hayes's room. A soft, wet sound, like fabric being slowly pulled apart. Kane stepped closer. The door was still slightly ajar. Light spilled through the crack. He pushed it open. Doc? Hayes sat on the edge of the bed, head lowered, shoulders trembling. Leonard. The trembling intensified. Hayes lifted his head. His eyes were open, but they weren't focusing correctly. They tracked slightly out of sync. Captain, he said. His voice overlapped itself, two tones at once. Stay where you are, Kane ordered. Hayes's mouth twitched. Skin along his jawline pulsed, like something moving underneath. You were right, Hayes whispered. About what? A smile split across his face, too wide, too elastic. About quarantine. His chest convulsed. Bones beneath the ribcage shifted visibly. Kane raised his pistol. Don't. Hayes's body jerked violently. His spine arched backward with a that echoed off the walls. His arms elongated, just slightly, before snapping back into place. Then, stillness. Complete. Hayes sat upright again, breathing evenly, eyes normal, the smile gone. Captain, he asked calmly, why are you pointing a gun at me? Kane didn't lower it. How do you feel?
Confused, Hayes replied. Did I pass out? There was no trace of the layered voice now, no visible distortion, nothing. Emily appeared behind Kane. She saw Hayes. She saw the gun. What happened? Kane didn't answer. He stared at Hayes for a long, unblinking moment, then slowly, very slowly, lowered the pistol. But he didn't put it away. And as they escorted Hayes back toward the common room, none of them noticed the thin, nearly invisible filament of translucent tissue retract slowly from beneath the skin at the base of his neck. Something inside him had finished learning, and it was getting better at pretending. No one slept after that. They didn't say it out loud, but it was understood. Sleep meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant replacement.
They gathered in the common room again, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The earlier shock had been replaced by something colder: calculation. Hayes sat upright in a metal chair under full light. Kane stood opposite him. "Tell me what you remember," Kane said evenly. Hayes rubbed his temples. "I was lying down. I felt feverish. Then I remember you standing over me with a gun." "That's it?" "That's it." Emily stepped forward. "When you attacked earlier, the dog, what did it feel like when it latched onto you?" Hayes hesitated. "Cold," he said finally. "Not pain, cold. Like something pressing into me." "Pressing how?" Goldman asked sharply. Hayes looked at him. "Like it was mapping me." Silence. Dawson swallowed audibly. Kane watched Hayes' breathing. Steady. Pulse at the neck, visible, normal. No twitching, no distortion. But Kane had seen the spine bend. He had heard the bones move. "You're quarantined," Kane said finally. Hayes gave a slow nod. "I assumed as much." Cole escorted him back to the southern room. This time the door was locked. They didn't argue about it. They didn't debate ethics. The line had been crossed. At 4:11 a.m., the radio crackled. All heads turned. Dawson leaned over the console. Static. Then a voice. Broken. Fragmented. "Polaris, respond. This is..." Goldman lunged closer. "That's external. Here, you, below, ice." The transmission dissolved into static. Emily looked up sharply. "Below?" Kane grabbed the mic. "This is Polaris Station 12. Identify yourself." Static. Then again, "Still here." The signal died. They stared at one another. "That wasn't us," Dawson whispered. "No," Goldman agreed. "Signal origin's wrong. It's coming from northeast." Cole's head snapped up. The crash site. Emily felt something settle in her stomach like lead. "They're alive?" Kane shook his head slowly. "No." "How do you know?" Dawson demanded. "Because Polaris Station personnel never called it Polaris," Kane said quietly. "They called it 12. The room went silent. At first light, they prepared to move. No splitting up, no pairs. They left Hayes locked inside. He didn't protest. That almost bothered Kane more than if he had. "You'll let me out when you get back?" Hayes asked calmly through the door. "If we get back," Kane replied. They sealed the southern corridor behind them. The snow machines cut across the frozen landscape toward the crash coordinates. The Arctic horizon looked endless, empty. But now they knew it wasn't. 2 miles out, they saw it. The fracture. A jagged tear in the ice shelf, partially refrozen, like something massive had punched through and the world had tried to heal around it. Cole killed his engine.
They dismounted cautiously. The air here felt different, heavier. Emily stepped closer to the fracture's edge. There it was. A tunnel. Not carved, melted. A vertical shaft descending into darkness, steam faintly rising from its depths. Goldman adjusted his headset. "That radio signal's stronger here," Dawson whispered. "How far down?" No one could see the bottom. Emily crouched at the edge. The ice around the shaft wasn't smooth like glacial melt. It was textured, as if something had moved through it, something alive. Kane shone his flashlight downward. The beam vanished into black. Then, a faint glimmer, far below. Metal, curved. Not satellite debris, not American, not Soviet. Something else. Emily exhaled slowly. "That's not ours." Goldman nodded. "No country builds like that." Dawson's voice trembled. "Then what is it?" No one answered, because they all knew. The radio crackled again, from below. "Hear you?" Kane stiffened. The voice was clearer now.
Captain. His blood ran cold. Dawson stared at him. It said Captain. Marcus. Emily's head snapped toward Kane.
"How does it know your name?"
Kane didn't speak. He leaned closer to the shaft. "This is Captain Kane. Identify yourself." Static. Then, "Cold down here." The voice was layered, familiar, painfully familiar. "Help me." Kane stepped back as if struck. Emily understood first.
"No."
"Marcus." It was her voice, Emily Carter's voice, coming from deep beneath the ice. She stared at Kane. "I didn't transmit." He knew she hadn't. The radio hissed again. Now another voice. "We're alive." Goldman went pale. That one. That one sounded like him. Cole raised his rifle slowly. "It's copying." "Yes," Emily whispered. "It's learning us." The wind intensified suddenly, screaming across the fracture like a warning. Then, from far below, something moved. A sound rose from the depths. Not mechanical, not natural. A shifting, layered chorus of voices trying to form words. And then, movement inside the shaft. Upward, fast. Kane didn't hesitate. "Back, now!" They scrambled toward the snow machines as something slick and dark surged upward along the ice walls. Not climbing, flowing, like oil defying gravity. Cole fired into the shaft. The bullets disappeared into black. The thing accelerated. It was almost at the surface. Kane gunned his engine. "Go!" They tore across the ice as something burst from the fracture behind them with a wet, thunderous crack. A mass of shifting limbs and faces, half-formed, collapsing into one another, reforming again. Voices screamed their names, perfectly, individually. "Marcus, Emily, Daniel." It moved impossibly fast across the ice. Cole turned in his seat and opened fire. Chunks tore free from the mass and immediately reabsorbed. "It's not slowing," Dawson yelled. Kane's mind raced. "Station!" "What?" Goldman shouted. "Fire!" They sped toward Polaris Station. The creature followed. Close. Too close. Kane skidded to a stop near the storage fuel drums. "Cole, now!" Cole understood instantly. He leapt off, yanked a flare from his vest, and hurled it at the fuel barrels as Kane fired into them. The explosion tore through the Arctic air. Flame roared upward, forming a blazing wall between the station and the pursuing mass. The creature hit the fire and shrieked. A sound that shook the ice beneath their feet.
It recoiled violently, writhing, burning. Not destroyed, but hurt. Deeply. Kane didn't waste the moment. Inside! They bolted into the station and slammed the reinforced doors shut behind them. The thing slammed against the outer wall seconds later. Metal screamed. The entire structure trembled. Inside the locked southern corridor, Dr. Leonard Hayes smiled. Because now, it wasn't just outside. It was already in. The impact against the station walls rattled bolts loose from the ceiling. Snow sifted down through ventilation seams. Outside, the thing screamed again, not in pain alone, but in fury. The sound vibrated through steel and bone alike, a chorus of half-formed human voices layered over something ancient and animal. Marcus Kane slammed the internal hatch and threw the deadbolt. "Fuel reserve?" he barked. "Half gone," Goldman shouted back, checking gauges. "That blast bought us time, not safety." Another slam hit the outer wall. The structure groaned. Emily braced herself against the table as the lights flickered violently. "It doesn't like fire," she said. "No," Kane replied grimly, "but it survives it." The building shuddered again. Then, silence. Not retreat, not absence.
Just waiting. They stood in the corridor listening. No movement outside. No scraping. No impact. Just wind. "That's worse," Dawson whispered. Cole nodded. "Yeah, it's thinking." Kane didn't correct him, because he believed it too. From the southern wing came a metallic click. All heads turned. The locked corridor. Hayes. Kane swore under his breath. "Stay here." He moved quickly, pistol raised. The southern hallway felt colder than before. The door at the end, Hayes' room, stood slightly ajar. The lock hung broken, bent outward. Kane froze. "Leonard?" he called. No response. He pushed the door open. Empty. The bed was overturned. Bandages lay on the floor. There was no blood, no struggle, just a faint trail of moisture leading toward the ventilation grate. Kane's stomach dropped. "It used him," Emily whispered from behind him. "Yes." The grate screws lay neatly on the floor, not ripped out, unscrewed. Goldman stared. "That's not instinct." "No," Kane agreed. "That's memory." From somewhere above them in the ventilation system came a soft, dragging sound. Slow, measured, moving deeper into the station. Dawson's breathing quickened. "It's inside the walls." Cole looked toward the main corridor. Or splitting. Emily's eyes sharpened. "Yes." They all looked at her. "If it can replicate tissue, if it can divide mass and still function, we may not be dealing with one organism anymore." "How many?" Dawson asked. She didn't answer, because she didn't know. The power cut out completely. Darkness swallowed them. Emergency lights flickered on seconds later, dim red. The station now looked like the inside of a dying artery. Goldman checked his handheld unit. "Main generator offline." "Coincidence?" Cole asked. No one believed in coincidence anymore. Above them, something shifted again. Then, a voice. Clear. Calm. "Captain?" Kane's blood went cold. It was his voice. Perfect. Tone, cadence, breathing pattern. "Captain Kane," it continued softly. "You left your wife alone that night." Emily turned sharply toward him. Kane's jaw tightened. The voice moved through the vents. "You could have picked her up." Goldman stared at Kane. "That's not—" "Shut up," Kane said quietly. The voice was closer now. "You were working late." Another vent cover clattered down the hallway. "You didn't answer her call." Dawson backed away.
How does it know that? Because it had scanned him, mapped him, learned him. The voice changed. Now Emily's. Marcus, don't. Then Goldman's. Open the door. Then Hayes's. We're still alive down here. Cole raised his rifle toward the ceiling. Where? The vent above them bulged outward slightly, metal warping from pressure within. Kane made the call. Engineering room, now. We collapsed the vent system. They ran. The station felt tighter now, smaller, as if the walls themselves were closing. Behind them, something moved in parallel, tracking, keeping pace. Inside engineering, Goldman threw open access panels. If we overload the backup generator, we can fry the grid. And, Kane demanded, and whatever's using the electrical network for heat mapping might lose orientation. Might? Yes, might! The ceiling above engineering creaked. Something heavy passed across it. Cole positioned himself under the vent opening. Do it. Goldman hesitated only half a second. Then he slammed the breaker and forced current through the secondary lines. The lights surged bright white, then exploded in sparks. The entire station plunged into darkness. The scream that followed was immediate. Not from above, not from outside. From everywhere.
The walls vibrated, the floor buckled. Something slammed into the engineering door from the other side, hard. Again. Again. Metal bent inward. Cole fired through it. The creature shrieked. Multiple voices layered over one another. Fire! Kane shouted. Cole grabbed a fuel canister from storage and hurled it at the door, just as Goldman ignited another flare. The hallway erupted in flame. The thing recoiled again, screaming, retreating down the corridor. Silence followed. But this silence was different, smaller, fragmented. Emily stepped forward carefully. It's weaker in the cold, she realized. It moves faster near heat sources. Goldman nodded. Generator, humans, engines. Kane's mind raced. Then we freeze it. They shut down every internal heat source they could. Emergency rations, chemical warmers, anything generating warmth. The temperature inside Polaris Station began dropping rapidly. Their breath fogged in the red emergency glow. Metal surfaces frosted over. From somewhere deeper in the station came sluggish movement. Slower now, dragging, less coordinated. Cole peered down the hallway. I see it. The mass was partially visible through smoke and frost. It looked incomplete. Segments of flesh stiffening, limbs retracting, faces half-formed and freezing mid-expression. But still alive, still aware, still watching them. Kane raised his pistol. Back toward the storage bay. They retreated methodically. The creature followed, slower, struggling. It lunged once, and part of it snapped off against the frozen floor like brittle meat. It shrieked again. Emily's voice shook, but held steady. Keep the temperature dropping. Goldman checked his handheld. We're near zero internal. Lower. He gave her a look. That kills us too. She met his eyes. I know. The creature made one final desperate surge forward. Cole and Kane fired simultaneously. Bullets tore through semi-frozen tissue. Chunks shattered against the walls. Then, it stopped moving. Not melted, not absorbed. Frozen solid. A grotesque sculpture of half-human forms fused together. The corridor fell quiet. No wind, no voices, just the cold. Kane. Is it dead? Emily stepped closer, careful. She crouched, studied it. It's dormant, she said finally. Not dead. Goldman. So what now? Kane looked down the corridor, looked at the frozen mass, then toward the outside world. We burn the entire station. Dawson's eyes widened. What? We can't risk Thor. Cole nodded grimly. He's right. Emily didn't argue because she understood something worse. The creature had adapted to heat. It had adapted to form. It had adapted to identity. Now it would adapt to cold. And when it did, there would be nothing left to slow it down. Outside, the Arctic wind howled again. And far beneath the ice, something answered. They didn't vote on it. There was no debate left in them. Polaris Station 12 had become an incubator. Marcus Kane walked the corridors one last time, checking structural points and fuel reserves while Goldman and Cole wired what remained of the accelerant into a crude ignition chain. The red emergency lights flickered weakly against frost-coated walls. The frozen mass in the corridor stood like a grotesque monument. Half-formed faces locked in silent screams, arms fused into torsos, ribs bursting through skin like coral through rock. Emily stood in front of it for a long moment. Its surface was rigid now, but not inert. Beneath the ice-crusted tissue, something faintly pulsed. Slow, measured, waiting. It's not dying, she said quietly. Kane didn't need confirmation. I know. Dawson approached cautiously.
You really think fire will finish it? Kane's eyes stayed on the thing.
No. They all looked at him. But collapse might. The plan was simple. Ignite the fuel stores, compromise the structural beams, let the building fall in on itself and bury the remains under tons of steel and snow. Then pray the Arctic did the rest. Cole set the final detonator inside the storage wing. We've got 10 minutes once this triggers. Enough to reach the machines? Goldman asked. If they start, Cole replied. Outside, wind speeds had increased. Snow moved in sheets across the ice field. The Arctic did not care what lived or died here. Emily pulled Kane aside near the entrance. There's something you need to consider. He looked at her. What? If it divided, she said carefully. If fragments separated when we froze it? His expression hardened. You think some of it isn't here? I think we don't know. That was worse, because she was right. They stepped outside into brutal wind. Cole triggered the ignition. For a moment, nothing. Then, a low internal thump, followed by another. Then fire erupted from the western side of the station. Flames tore through fuel lines with a roar that swallowed the wind. Windows burst outward in showers of glass. The structure shuddered, collapsed inward. A chain reaction of explosions rippled through the facility. Steel twisted, roof segments folded. The central corridor caved in with a deep, final groan. The frozen mass disappeared beneath falling debris and flame. Kane shielded his face as heat washed across the ice. The station burned hard and fast. Within minutes, the main structure gave way entirely. A blackened skeleton remained. Then that too began to sink as underlying ice fractured from thermal shock. The ground trembled. A massive crack split the surface beneath the ruins.
The entire station sank partially into its own impact basin. Snow began to pour in over the wreckage, nature reclaiming, erasing. Silence followed. Just wind, just white. Dawson. Is it over? No one answered, because no one believed in over anymore. They mounted the snow machines. Fuel was limited. They had just enough to reach the emergency extraction coordinates 30 miles south, assuming the weather held. It didn't.
Halfway across the ice field, the storm intensified into a full whiteout. Visibility dropped to near zero. They tethered the machines together to avoid separation. Wind screamed like something alive. Snow blinded. Goldman's voice crackled through the headset. "Compass is drifting," Cole shouted back. "Magnetic interference? Or storm distortion?" Kane fought the handlebars as crosswinds shoved the machine sideways. Behind him, Emily held on tight. Then, a sound cut through the storm. Not wind, not engine. A distant, rising tone, like a harmonic resonance. Everyone heard it. Dawson's voice trembled. "Please tell me that's not..." A shape moved in the white, fast, parallel to them, half seen through blowing snow. Long, low, flowing across the surface without disturbing it. Kane's pulse spiked. "It survived," Emily breathed. "No," Kane said, but he wasn't convincing himself. The shape surged closer. For a split second, lightning from static discharge illuminated it clearly. A thin, stretched form, elongated like a ribbon of flesh hardened by cold. Segments of faces embedded within its surface, eyes opening and closing. It had adapted. It wasn't relying on heat anymore. It had learned the cold. Cole opened fire. The rounds tore through the form. Chunks splintered off, but instead of reabsorbing, they shattered into smaller pieces, each fragment wriggling independently across the ice. Goldman shouted. "It's multiplying!" Kane made a brutal decision. "Cut the tether! Scatter!" They severed the lines. Each snow machine veered into separate vectors. The creature split its pursuit, fragments chasing each rider. Kane leaned hard into the wind, pushing the engine to its limit. Behind him, a ribbon of flesh skimmed across the ice with terrifying speed. It leapt, landing on the rear of his machine. Metal screamed. Emily turned and saw a half-formed face pushing through the surface of the creature. Her own face, screaming. "Marcus!" Kane didn't hesitate. He slammed the throttle and steered directly toward a visible ice ridge ahead. At the last second, he jerked the machine sideways and rolled. The snowmobile flipped. The creature slammed into the ridge at full speed. Its frozen, brittle body shattered against the ice. Fragments scattered across the surface. Kane rolled hard through snow. Emily landed beside him. They scrambled to their feet. The fragments twitched weakly. But something was different now. Each piece was smaller, less coordinated. The storm intensified. Wind buried the fragments rapidly. Snow filled cracks, covered them, smothered them. Silence returned again. Goldman's voice crackled faintly through static. "Marcus, report." Kane coughed, pulling Emily up. "We're alive." "Cole's down," Goldman said. "Machine overturned." "Dawson?" Kane asked. No response, just static. Then, a faint, broken transmission. "Still here." Kane froze. That wasn't Dawson's tone. It wasn't anyone's. The storm swallowed the sound, and somewhere beneath the accumulating snow, tiny fragments continued to move. Learning, waiting. Not dead, just smaller and harder to find. The storm swallowed everything. Wind erased tracks within seconds. Snow buried wreckage, footprints, blood, and the thin, twitching fragments that had scattered across the ice like shattered glass. Marcus Kane dragged Emily behind the overturned snowmobile, using it as partial shelter from the wind. "Cole, Goldman! Respond! He shouted into the radio. Static. Then, faintly, I'm up. Goldman's voice, distorted but human. Cole's breathing. Legs broken. Relief lasted less than a second. Dawson, Kane pressed. Silence. Then something else answered. Captain. Not over the radio. Behind him. Kane turned, slowly. Through the white haze, a figure stumbled toward them. Paul Dawson, jacket torn, goggles missing, face pale with frostbite. Help! He gasped, collapsing to his knees. Emily moved instinctively. Kane grabbed her arm hard. Stop! Dawson looked up. His eyes were wide. Too wide.
Marcus, it's cold.
Wind howled around them. Kane's mind raced. They had watched fragments scatter, small pieces, adaptive pieces. You fell, Kane said steadily. Where? Dawson blinked. Machine. Flipped. On which side of the ridge? A pause. Half a second too long. Left, Dawson answered. Kane had rolled right. Dawson's machine had been tethered center. Emily saw it too. Her breath hitched. Dawson's jaw trembled. Don't do this, he whispered. But the tone shifted midway through the sentence, layered, duplicated. Beneath his collar, something moved under the skin, just slightly. Kane raised his pistol. I'm sorry. Dawson's expression changed instantly. The fear dropped away, the face relaxed, almost curious. Interesting, it said. The storm swallowed the gunshot. Dawson's body fell backward into the snow. It didn't thrash, didn't scream. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his torso split along the sternum in a thin, vertical line, not violently, carefully, like a zipper opening. A narrow, translucent mass slid out from inside him and hit the snow, small, no larger than a forearm. It tried to move toward Emily. Kane crushed it with his boot and fired twice more into the remains. The fragments spasmed, then froze. Snow buried both host and parasite within seconds. Emily stared at the spot. He was gone already, she whispered. Yes. And that might have been the worst part. They regrouped with Goldman and Cole behind a shallow snowdrift. Cole's leg was bent wrong. Goldman's face was bleeding from a cut above his eye. How many? Goldman asked. At least one confirmed, Kane replied. Just one? Emily asked quietly. No one answered, because that wasn't how this thing worked. They couldn't outrun the storm now. Fuel was low, Cole couldn't ride, extraction coordinates were unreachable in whiteout conditions. Kane scanned the horizon. There, a dark rise in the distance. Rock. Solid. Cave, he said. They moved slowly, supporting Cole between them, dragging gear behind. The storm thickened further. The Arctic erased their world down to 5 feet of visibility. When they finally reached the rock formation, they found a shallow, natural hollow on the lee side. Temporary shelter. Barely. They huddled together, conserving heat. No one spoke for several minutes. Wind screamed overhead like a living thing searching. Then, Goldman began to laugh. Not hysterical, not quite sane. It's elegant, he said. Kane looked at him sharply. What is? The organism, Goldman replied, breath fogging. It doesn't invade civilizations directly. It crashes itself into isolation. Lets paranoia do the rest. Emily's eyes narrowed. Daniel. He looked at her, too calmly. It thrives on mistrust. Kane's muscles tensed. Take off your glove, Kane said quietly. Goldman frowned. What? Take off your glove.
Slowly, Goldman removed it. His fingers were pale from cold. Human. No distortion, no movement beneath the skin. Emily stepped closer.
Your face, she said softly. What about it? There's no frostbite. Goldman smiled faintly. I was behind Cole, less exposure. Reasonable, logical. Too logical. Cole shifted painfully. Stop it, he muttered. We're tearing each other apart. The storm roared louder. And then, a sound from deeper inside the rock hollow. A soft, wet sliding noise. All four froze. Kane slowly raised his flashlight. The beam cut across the stone wall and caught something embedded in a crack in the rock. Small, frozen. A fragment. It must have blown here in the storm. It twitched once, weakly. Then another twitch. Goldman lunged for it instinctively. Kane shoved him back violently. Don't touch it! The fragment split in two, each piece smaller than a finger. They dropped into the snow between them. Cole panicked and tried to crush one with his boot. The piece slipped under his sole and vanished into a seam in his pant leg. Cole froze. All of them stared at his thigh. Nothing happened for a full 3 seconds. Then Cole screamed. His body jerked violently as something rippled beneath his thermal layers. It moved fast, upward. Kane tackled him. Hold him! Emily pinned Cole's arms as Goldman tried to rip open the pant leg. The movement under the skin accelerated, up the thigh, into the torso. Cole's screaming cut off mid-breath. His eyes went unfocused, his mouth opened, and in a voice not entirely his own, he whispered, It's warmer inside. Kane drew his knife. Emily realized what he was about to do. Marcus? Too late. Kane plunged the blade deep into Cole's chest and twisted. The body convulsed, once, twice, then went limp. The snow beneath them turned dark. Emily stared at Kane in shock. He didn't look at her. He was watching the body, waiting. Nothing emerged. No splitting, no second form. Just stillness. Wind, snow. Goldman backed away slowly. 2 of us left, he murmured.
3,
Emily corrected. Goldman's eyes shifted to her, and something flickered there. A calculation. A possibility. Kane saw it too. He stood slowly, gun steady between them. We don't wait, he said. We move south, now. Goldman nodded, too quickly. They stepped out into the storm again. White swallowed them instantly. 10 steps later, Goldman disappeared. No scream, no sound, just gone. Emily spun around. Daniel! Nothing but snow. Kane grabbed her arm. Don't. Because something moved just beyond visibility. Large, low, coordinated. Not fragmented anymore. Reassembled. It had used the storm, used them, used every mistake. The shape circled them slowly, not rushing, not attacking. Learning. Emily's voice trembled. What do we do? Kane stared into the white void. We make it choose. He turned toward the open ice field, fired a single shot into the air, then another. The shape shifted direction, tracking him. Run south, he told Emily quietly. No, that's an order. He shoved her hard toward the white horizon. For a second, she hesitated, then ran. Kane stood alone in the storm. The shape emerged fully now. Tall, humanoid, but wrong. Faces rippling across its surface. Hayes, Dawson, Cole, Goldman, even Emily, all layered within it. It stepped closer. Snow didn't crunch beneath it. Marcus, it said in perfect unison.
He raised his final flare, struck it against the metal housing, ignited. Red light exploded against white. The creature recoiled slightly, not in fear, in assessment. Cain smiled faintly. You wanted warmth. He turned and ran toward the largest visible ice fracture ahead, the one partially concealed by drifting snow. The creature followed, faster. It lunged just as Cain leapt. He slammed the flare into the crack beneath him. Gas venting from the fissure ignited instantly.
A chain of subterranean pressure ruptured. The ice shelf beneath both of them shattered. For a moment, weightlessness. Then collapse. The creature's many voices screamed as the surface gave way. Flame and freezing vapor erupted upward as methane pockets detonated beneath the ice. The storm swallowed the explosion. Snow poured into the collapsing fissure, and then nothing. Just wind. Just white. Days later, a search aircraft passed over the region. It found wreckage where Polaris Station once stood. No survivors. No clear biological residue. The report listed catastrophic structural failure due to fuel detonation and ice instability. Case closed, classified, archived. But far beneath the Arctic ice, deep in cracks where heat from shifting tectonic plates met ancient frozen layers, microscopic fragments continued to move. Slow, dormant, waiting for the next source of warmth. And somewhere far to the south, walking alone toward a distant rescue flare, Emily Carter didn't notice the faint, almost imperceptible ripple beneath the skin at the base of her neck. It was very small, for now.